Can you imagine that there's an empty plot lying around Central Park, New York? Or can you imagine that around in London there is 2 acres of empty land? I mean, it's only in Delhi that we look at these abandoned plots and, disputed buildings and say, this is normal.
We have a responsibility to do towards the decisions that we make, but we can't take our failures at a personal level.
Architects need to think about their services as a viable business. I think we all have the ability to control our own life, right?
Welcome to another episode of Europe Beyond Blueprints. Today on the episode, we have architect Amit Khanna from AKDA Designs in New Delhi. Amit is not only an architect by heart, he's also made a big play into the construction industry, into the real estate space. Our conversation today ranged from his life journey, where he was brought up in Nairobi, how he shifted to Delhi, and all his life experiences that has gone into building a very successful practice as well as a fantastic business. Hi Amit, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here.
So, first time on a podcast?
Yes, actually.
Yeah. I believe you're not too much into social media.
Not at all. So, I like we were talking about earlier, I don't have an Instagram account. I don't have any of the apps on my phone. I don't have YouTube on my phone.
Oh, really?
And so people in the office ask me what I do in the evening, and I say I only read a book. I don't have a television at home. So yeah, I live under a rock as far as the world is concerned.
But don't you feel social pressure, peer pressure, like missing out because...
Not really, because I think I have a lot of real human connections, real friends. And I like to go out. I'm a very social person. I'm not the sort of person that is happy to sit at home in the evenings, right? I would rather go out and get a drink with somebody,
right,
or go out for a walk with somebody. And so, I may not have access to whatever's happening around the world in minutiae, but I have a general sense of what's happening, and I think that's enough for me.
But, from your architectural practice, you must be having clients who come up with stuff they've seen online. Do you face that challenge?
So it is a problem. Yeah. It is a problem because you have a customer who has access to pretty much everything that has ever been built in all of humanity. Right. And because they don't have clarity on what it is that they're after, it's confusing for them to be able to try and filter from what is a Edwardian chair and what is a Georgian chair and what is a Tudor chair versus what is a, let's say a more modern chair by an Alvar Aalto or whatever. And I think this idea that the client has the ability to take these informed choices, right, is something that we have to grapple with. We're not completely sure whether we want to give the client that amount of power that, okay, why don't you take this decision? But we also don't know how to control the information that is going to a client, right? So typically, let's say, 20 years ago, you could mandate that, okay, this is what you're going to see, and out of this you have to choose.
Right.
But that's not true anymore, right? So a client has the ability to choose from anything, and that makes it a bit harder. I'm very fortunate in the sense that we work with enlightened clients. And when I say enlightened clients, I mean clients who have already built before, right? And we're very rarely do we work with first-time clients who've never built anything before.
Right.
And when a client is already built, they already know that it's going to be limiting for themselves if they try and do all the decision making. It's like you going to a hairdresser and say, mera ye wala baal aise kaatna aur ye wala aise kaatna, right? Let him do his job. He knows his job far better than you do. And so a lot of our clients we are lucky that these clients come to me and say, okay, we trust you. We're here because you seem to know what you're doing. We have a few requirements that we'd like to tell you, but beyond that, it's your show. And I guess, we're lucky to be in that position.
But can you break down the financials of real estate in India right now? If you were to talk about Delhi, we are seeing a lot of large-scale housing projects coming up.
Yeah.
Not in Delhi because there are too many restrictions here to build those type of townships. But you have these townships coming up all around Delhi in the NCR area.
Yeah.
Then you also have the real estate market that exists in South Delhi, in West Delhi, where you have these G+2, G+3 properties, builder flats that come up.
Yeah.
What's the business sense to it? How much money does a builder make on it? What is his cost of construction, cost of acquisition? What is the ROI on the money he's investing? Vis-a-vis what's happening in Gurgaon or on that side.
So I'm going to just break this down a little bit, right? I think what tends to happen is that in the NCR today, and I'm going to say this and you're not going to agree with me, but land is cheap. Okay? I can already see that you don't agree with me.
No,
right?
I don't. But sure. Wait, you said NCR.
NCR.
NCR, yes.
Right?
Delhi, no.
Right? Okay. And I can extrapolate it to Delhi, but I'll just explain why. If you think about the components of a building, right? The cost of the construction of any, let's say we're talking about residential, we're not talking about commercial right now, but if we talk about high-rise residential, the cost of construction of high-rise residential is anywhere between 7 to 10,000 rupees a square foot.
Okay.
The cost of low-rise residential is a little less, anywhere between 5 to 7,000 rupees a square foot, right? The cost of land, right, is 40 to 70,000 rupees a square foot, right? The cost of the land is still a small multiple of the cost of construction, right? Which means that when you are purchasing as an end consumer, let's say you are in the business, you're in the market for an apartment, and let's say you spend 10 crores on an apartment, 8 crores of that is still the land.
Correct.
Right? If you think about it, all you're really purchasing in property is a share of the land, and land is limited. You take the same example and you extrapolate it to, let's say, a city like New York, which is an equivalent financial capital, right? Maybe, or Mumbai even, right?
Yeah.
In Mumbai, land is way more expensive, right, than Delhi.
Yeah.
Right? In Mumbai, if you have a 1 acre plot in what's a good place? Let's say in Bandstand, right? And where you can build, 200,000 square feet on it. That land is already 4 to 5 times more expensive than what it is in Delhi. In Delhi, the land is still cheap because we don't have the infrastructure to support growth, right? So this is a unique problem that we currently have in the NCR. We are the largest agglomeration of people in the world in one place. So whenever I say this, people say, no, Tokyo is 37 million and we are only 32 million. But Tokyo is spread out over a much larger area, right? Tokyo, Kyoto is a much larger conurbation as compared to Delhi. And nobody in the history of humanity has ever had to solve this problem. No, in the history of humanity, there's never been, 3.2 crore people sitting in, one small landmass. Now, what is going to happen? All of these people are not going to suddenly leave, but these people are going to become wealthier. Right now, 95% of these people can't afford a home. So in Delhi, what you have is that you have plotted development, you have high-rise housing, and then you have 4 or 5 different sorts of housing. You have governmental housing, so about 40% of all of the land in Delhi is still owned by the central government. So R.K. Puram and Naroji Nagar, Sarojini Nagar, and you see that they're being redeveloped now. You have urban villages, so you have Munirka and Shahpur Jat and Hauskas, and a lot of people live in these.
Yeah.
And then you have these sort of, for lack of a better word, totally sort of organically developed peri-urban areas like Sangam Vihar. So if you look at a map and you see Scenic Farms on one side and Sangam Vihar on one side, Scenic Farms is maybe 0.3 dwelling units per acre. So it's 1 dwelling unit every 3 acres. Standard size of standard land parcel.
Right.
And on Sangam Vihar, you have 300 dwelling units per acre. Because 95% of the people in Delhi still can't afford to buy a home, they still don't have the means to buy a home, the competition for home ownership is still very low, right? So you as a customer for a 10 crore rupee apartment, you're only dealing with maybe 100 other people. But imagine if now the purchasing power was such that you could be dealing with 1,000 other people. What is going to happen? The prices will go up.
The price is going to shoot up.
Right? The price will go up. We are also very underbuilt as a city. right?
We are very underbuilt as a
right. So
city.
if you look at Delhi and you look at the map of the Delhi environs, right, a lot of the development is concentrated in what is south and west of the original Lutyens Delhi, right? There is this large part of Delhi which is towards the west, which is even now agricultural. If you go beyond Bhavana and you
Yeah.
go to Kundli, etc., you'll see that. I mean, you're in Delhi and you're driving past fields where wheat is growing, right? I mean, unheard of, right? And on the other hand, you come to this side of Delhi, which is more to the south and west of Delhi, which borders both Faridabad and Gurgaon, and you see that there is a lot more development, but it's all very low rise. So on a very specific basis of Delhi, we are extremely underbuilt and land is extremely cheap because the regulations to that allow building are sort of 19th century, right? So the height limit example, for instance, you can't build more than 17.5 meters in Delhi,
Right.
which is limited, ostensibly limited. I may get into trouble with this, but ostensibly limited to the height of a fire ladder, right? Now that problem doesn't exist in Gurgaon, where people have built high rise and they've figured out the fire problem, right? So you have two staircases, you have fire suppression
No, the
system.
worldwide, this, I mean, why
It's
only
a
Gurgaon?
solvable problem.
Yeah.
It's a solvable
Yeah.
problem. So if you allow for two, three things to happen in Delhi, right? One is you allow for private aggregation of land, which is currently not allowed.
Not
So
allowed.
if you own, I mean, you're familiar with Vasant Vihar. Vasant Vihar has got Palam Marg on it,
Yeah.
right? Which is this 200-meter stretch of 25 plots that face the ring road. Each of those plots is half an acre,
Yeah.
2,000 square yards. 2,000 multiplied by 25, right? So that's 50,000 square
50,000.
yards of land. Currently, you can buy that for, I would say, maybe 5,000 crores, right? Can you imagine owning 50,000 square yards of land along Central Park in New York? What would that cost you today, right? It would cost you in the billions of dollars, right? And here you can buy it for, what is the equivalent? Let's say 50 million, right? I think it's incredibly cheap because you can't build anything on it. But the moment you allow people to start building on it, land is going to become way more expensive. And therefore, this comes back to the first conversation we had before the cameras were switched on. That is real estate a good investment play? I think it's a good investment play provided the government looks to it and says, okay, we need to monetize this asset. We need to allow people to build in this city. We need to create the infrastructure to support it because obviously people want to be here. People are living here under the worst of conditions imaginable, right? So you have people leaving great environments in their villages and coming to work here simply because they want to earn a livelihood in
I've
India.
left a cleaner, I won't say a better city, but definitely a cleaner, healthier city and shifted to Delhi for work.
Oh, really? Where were you earlier?
Calcutta.
Okay,
Born brought
exactly.
up Calcutta, shifted
Exactly.
here about 10, 12 years ago. But yeah, I mean, if you.
Because this is where the business is,
Yeah,
right?
this is where the business is.
Correct. And this is, I think, why do I live in this polluted place?
No,
Blah blah
I
blah.
always wanted to shift out. The reason of shifting to Delhi was for work. If the decision was to shift out, then shift out could have happened anywhere else in the country, right?
Yeah.
They're much better in nicer cities to sadly live in. Delhi is not a great place to
But
have
if you
young
think
kids
about,
growing up.
can you imagine the opportunity that we have here?
Yeah.
Right? You have a city that is so obviously underbuilt, so obviously underserved by infrastructure. I mean, the metro has been great, but we're still underserved. But can you imagine if we had good infrastructure and you change the building bylaws to allow people to build here? You still have your pockets, you still have your Nehru Park and your Lodi Garden and your Aravali Biodiversity Reserve, but you have more people, right? And more people encourages shops to develop on streets. You can walk more, and that becomes the blueprint for a thriving sort of city, right? And so I think we are very, very close to the start of the development of a good quality Delhi, right? And I think therefore I'm incredibly positive about it, right? I think that, I mean, if I get to ride the wave, that'll be brilliant, but I'm guessing I'll be too old to ride the wave. But I think people who are starting out in their careers right now and they are in the construction space, I think it's going to be incredibly exciting.
Coming back to the numbers, like
Yeah, yeah.
hardcore numbers, if somebody has 150, 200 crores to invest
Yeah.
and get into real estate, what do you think they should do with it?
Well,
And I'm talking about big ticket size, and then I'm going to ask you a follow up question: कि somebody young who saved 2 crore rupees, 3 crore rupees, and so उसके लिए क्या करना चाहिए? तो जो जिसके पास 150, 200 crore रुपए उसको क्या करना चाहिए?
I think I would say part of it depends on your horizon, right? I think if you have a very long term horizon,
10 to 15 years.
if you have a 10-15 year horizon, then you should absolutely leverage it, right? So let's say you have 100 rupees to spend, you should look for projects that utilize 200 rupees worth of capital, because there is going to be a certain amount of growth built into real estate due to inflation, right? And a certain amount of natural growth. So I look at how real estate performs, and real estate typically does about 10% a year, but 8% of that just comes from deterioration of actual currency, right? So the inflation is 8% and the actual growth is about 2%. If you look at such a number, the barrier to producing these buildings is, it's almost laughably silly कि उसके पास उसके पास cost structure नहीं है, उसके पास he cannot collateralize it. The reason, if we were in a developed market, can you imagine that there's an empty plot lying around Central Park, New York? Or can you imagine that around in London there is 2 acres of empty land? I mean, it's only in Delhi that we look at these abandoned plots and disputed buildings and say, this is normal. Because the land is not expensive enough for somebody to do something about it, right? And I think once you come to that point where the land is so valuable that not doing anything about it is criminally stupid, only then do you say that, okay, you are now actually in an advanced state of this industry. And so to answer your question about the 150 sort of bracket, I think I could possibly find today at least 100 such plots in Delhi, which are about 2,000 square yards, used to be industrial, are now, you could pay to get them changed to commercial. You could put up 100,000 square feet on it and you could create long-term rental income. Now, the other side of the challenge is there a market for it, right? Now, if you think about it, a lot of the people who are investing into putting up offices in Gurgaon have a really unhappy workforce, right? Because the griping that I hear from a lot of people is, we have to travel for 1 hour. दो घंटा जाना पड़ता है, आना पड़ता है, right? And this unfortunately doesn't apply only to junior executives, it applies even to senior executives.
Once you've bought a house, you're not going to leave the house and shift closer to your workplace.
Yeah. And Gurgaon as a workplace, right? It may be a great place to go work because you have these really high quality buildings that have been put up by DLF, and really high quality buildings. I mean, they really know how to build well, right? And but you don't have any means of getting into and out of that city efficiently, right? And you can't, unfortunately, in this heat, expect a senior executive to walk the last mile from the metro station to his office. It just doesn't happen, right? He's happy कि वो अपने BMW में air conditioning में जा रहा है. So I think if you had a robust marketplace for commercial buildings in Delhi, you would not really take away from what is there in Gurgaon, but I think a lot of the higher quality businesses, would want to have their offices in Delhi because their workforce is also in Delhi and they're not really commuting. So on the market side, I don't think there is a demand constraint. I think that there is a lack of if you think about it, the commercial real estate space in Delhi is dominated by Nehru Place, Rajendra Place, stuff like that.
A little bit towards CP Barakhamba Road. It's expensive, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe there in all of Delhi, maybe there are 120, 130 buildings, right, that one can look at. Yeah. Some of it is now started to happen in Okhla.
Right? Yeah, now I see a lot of
and new buildings are coming up in Okhla. Some of them have started coming up in Kirtinagar,
Saket mein bhi aa gaye.
We have done 2 buildings in Moti Nagar, which are about 100,000 square feet each. And so I've seen that now there is some increase, but if you look at it, it's still a laughably small number.
It's very small. It's not organized. Whatever commercial space exists in Delhi is like somebody had a plot of land and built a building and leased it out.
Yeah.
It's not, you will not call it a commercial complex, not anywhere scale of what you get in Noida, or definitely anywhere close to what you get in Gurgaon, where
Exactly.
there's a cafe, there's a bunch of offices together, then there's a cafe, there is a
There's
shop, there's
parking.
parking, there is some kind of recreational thing aspas. Like look at what Worldmark has done for Aerocity.
Exactly. I mean, we should have so much more of
Thousands
Aerocity.
of them in
Yeah.
all across Delhi. I agree.
Yeah. And so that is to answer your question about, let's say, that bracket of investment. But if you let's say somebody has, a couple of crores to invest, then I think real estate is not really the correct place to
नहीं मैं कह
invest.
रहा हूँ कि उनका पोर्टफोलियो है उसमें 2 करोड़ रुपए वो earmark कर लिए कि रियल एस्टेट में लगा सकते हैं.
I don't think Delhi is the place for it, right? Because if you think about it from a
क्या
global
मिलेगा
point of
करोड़?
view, 2 crores is what, $200,000.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, you can use it to make an investment, but if you think that your cash flow from it is going to be able to pay for the repairs and maintenance, is going to be able to pay for the house tax, and is going to be able to pay for a profit on it, I think that's a bit unreasonable, right? Plus, and this may sound a bit classist, but when you buy $200,000 worth of real estate in India, let's say 2 crores worth of real estate in India, your rental income, a good metric is that you get 25,000 rupees per crore.
Correct. 9%.
Right. And so on a 2 crore investment, you're dealing with somebody who's paying 50,000 rupees as rent. That's not really the customer you want to have, right? Because, and I don't want to come across as a...
No, it's true.
Right? But
it is true.
It is not the customer you want to have, because that's a problematic customer to service, right? I mean, you want a customer, you're happy to service a problematic customer who's renting, whose monthly outflow is 1 crore rupees in rent, because then he has a genuine problem and you're happy to service that. But that bracket is really hard to service.
You answered a question of mine. So thank you for that.
Because either you have a portfolio of 10 such things.
Yeah.
And then you have a manager.
It's a proper business.
Yeah, you have a manager, and that manager has got a painter, an electrician, and a plumber. And if somebody has a problem, he goes and fixes it. But if you think that you're going to do it on your own, if you're going to invest in it and then have this, this cash flow coming, and you think it's free.
And then you have also in India, evicting non-paying tenants is also a pain. I wouldn't say it's hard or easy. It's a pain.
I think it used to be much harder, and I think now it's become a bit easy. Yes, I think it's not for the faint of heart, right? It's not. And I think in many ways it's good that there is a moat around it, right? And that it's not available to everybody. It makes it interesting for people like us who are interested in it. I think we all have the ability to control our own life, right? I mean, part of what I said earlier about getting the freedom to not be bound down by what society thinks I should do and what, because for me, running a business and coming from a family of people who have always been in service, it was seen to be as, why is he doing this? There's so much uncertainty, blah, blah, blah. But I think it has been incredibly liberating, right? And
so why did you shift from Mumbai to Delhi? Because of college and then...
Family,
okay.
Right? So
your mom's from here?
My grandfather was always here. He used to work for MD. My dad was in the government and he used to get shifted everywhere. And eventually my parents decided that we should move back to Delhi to be with family, be with his father.
So between Mumbai and Delhi, you prefer Mumbai over Delhi?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Delhi is a cautionary tale for business because, as I'm sure you know, it's really, really hard to do business in Delhi because A, people aren't super clean.
Thagoo ki nagari.
B, everybody is somebody, right? And so people try and pull things all the time, right? Okay, I understand that it's a highly expensive purchase, right? I recognize that, right? And it's more than anything else than you'll ever spend. So people try and attack it from all different ways. That, okay, acha, isko aise kam kar lete hain. I know this guy, why don't we buy from him? I'm friends with so-and-so, let's buy from him. Let's get this done. MCD mein, this is the cost. No, I'll make a call to the commissioner and make it happen. I think what happens is, in Bombay, you are seen as, okay, this transaction has a cost, and this is the cost for executing that transaction without calling any favors. And customers are happy to pay that cost. I think in Delhi, people break up the cost into actual cost and profit. And they say, okay, if I did this, I would be able to reduce down that cost a little bit. And so why would I not? It doesn't cost me anything, right? Correct. And I think that's disruptive, right, to a business side, right? If I, like, for instance, if I came to you that, I'll just pick up the plywood, I'll send my truck to your factory and pick up the plywood from there. You'll be like, oh, well, I have to invoice it to my distributor and I have to pay the margin to him. Otherwise, and it disrupts your way of doing business, yes, right? And if I don't recognize that, right, as a customer, that I'm disrupting your business in order to facilitate, what I think is ease at my end, I think that happens a lot in Delhi. It does. Right. And I think in that sense, it's a cautionary tale. Right? That Delhi में धंधा करना आसान नहीं है.
नहीं, दिल्ली में धंधा करना आसान नहीं है. I think धंधा करना in general आसान नहीं है, right? And then Delhi is another ball game in that. But hey, you've made your life here. I am making my life here. So there's definitely something that's working for the city, right?
And I think we are in an industry that is booming. We are willing to do the work it takes to service a booming industry. And I think to some extent we're willing to make the personal investment that it takes to, be part of this thing. And I see a lot of people for whom, they have actually scaled to what it takes to be able to service, right? Like, I think there are product manufacturers and I would say suppliers out there that have understood the game very well and have preemptively scaled. Right. And I'm sure you also know these people, right? And I think when you look at them and you say, okay, well, that model can't be financially sustainable, right? Because they're spending so much on inventory and so much on marketing and so much on, getting business through the door. But I think it's very similar to what any other business would be doing, is that you are developing the brand so that 10 years down the line, no one else stands a chance, right? You're competing only with 2 or 3 people. How is the expectation from a high quality manufacturer so high, and from a faceless manufacturer there is no quality standard at all? And when I go to a distributor and I say, okay, I have this requirement, right? The distributor is trying to sell an array of products, right? Not just high quality products. He's trying to sell all sorts of products. And I think the challenge that you would have is that you have to compete after doing everything correctly with price on people who are not doing anything correctly.
So, Amit, I'll tell you, the plywood industry particularly, 75% is unorganized or 80% is unorganized. Yeah. 75% is unorganized. So that means 25% is the organized players. Of the 25% organized players ka share, 20% belongs to branded plywood. Okay. Right. Having a high standard on us is right. You should have it because we are a large industry, we are organized, we have a corporate structure, and because we're doing large volume of production in a large place, yes, there should be norms on us. But frankly, we are still competing, not amongst ourselves, but we're competing with the unorganized sector.
Yeah.
You come to paints, you come to adhesives, they were very unorganized, and over the last 40-50 years they have become very organized, where the paint industry is 85% organized today. Yes. Or 80% organized today. Therefore, going after the bigger players there makes sense because they will uplift the smaller guys and make it very difficult for them to survive. Right now, when the environmental codes are applied on us, it actually crowds us out even further, because at the end of the day this table is made with something. Now इसके ऊपर laminate लग गया, इसके ऊपर vinyl लग गया, इसके ऊपर कोई और material लग गई है. ये किसके plywood से बना नहीं पता. इंडिया में अभी भी plywood purchase is a very emotional buy from a few select ultra HN, I won't say ultra HNIs, but HNIs, or to be soon to be HNIs who are aspirational, because they still want to buy a ply which is consistent with the quality of house that they're building.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But that's not how 95% of the public thinks.
Yeah.
इन यार आपकी 60 रुपए की मेरी सबसे सस्ती प्लाई जो रिटेल होती है ऑन अ कमर्शियल ग्रेड इज अबाउट $75 a square feet.
Okay.
That's my starting point for a 19 mm commercial ply, and the end point for a lot of manufacturers is $40 a square feet. So from that guy's perspective, the 30 रुपया फुट भी मैं क्यों दूं, मेरा कॉस्ट डबल से ज्यादा हो गया ना.
Correct.
बट वो इतना सस्ता क्यों है?
Actually, I mean, for people who are in the industry, they realize that, okay, the actual cost of producing this, if you comply with everything, if you pay your taxes and if you pay ESIPF to your workers, is going to be that much.
It is going to be that much.
Right? And if you don't comply with anything, then you can produce the raw material for this. Right?
Yeah.
And I think, like I said about all other things, it is only a matter of time till the industry matures and realize, and there is a widespread realization that you cannot be producing building materials in a cottage manner, right? Where, I mean, it's not like carpets where one weaver is making a carpet sitting in Badohi somewhere. We are producing stuff that is building, third largest economy in the world. And we can't be doing it, basis substandard stuff.
But then you have the other side कि वो छोटे वाले जाएंगे कहाँ, हमारी माइक्रो इंडस्ट्री का क्या होगा? So there's it's a chicken and egg.
I think there is a historical precedent for it, right? I think historically, as capitalism has matured and economies have matured, smaller mom and pop store setups have always been eradicated through larger institutionalized frameworks of, whatever, whether they're factories, whether they're
I think the reverse is happening. If you look at the mom and pop stores are actually doing better now than they've ever done before because they found a way of adding value.
But that is a niche.
Yeah, but they found a way of adding value. You have to find
right?
a way of adding value.
I don't think, like for instance, do you think cement would ever be a niche industry?
No,
it cannot
it's
be.
Not supposed to be.
Because it's such a large investment required that it's natural that there are only 10 producers. Similarly, steel. And I think the same is going to eventually happen with an industry like plywood, or like you said, it has already happened with paint. That eventually there will only be 10 manufacturers, and those 10 manufacturers will be controlling 90% of the output.
Chalo, that was a wonderful conversation. I think we'll have to cut this a little short, otherwise we can go on talking for the rest of the day. So thank you, Amit, for coming on the show and being very open and frank in your conversation. And it was great having you here.
It's great being here. Thank you.
Thank you.